Exactly.
Test.
Good morning. And welcome to the Committee of Adjustment hearings for Rural Panel 3. We're a City of Ottawa quasi judicial tribunal that holds public hearings to consider Planning Act applications, including minor variances to the zoning requirements and consent to sever land. Our hearings are now in person at Ben Franklin Place, 101 Centerpoint Drive. We also enable remote participation by video conferencing for our registered speakers. We are live streaming on YouTube, and the video will be archived and available for future viewing by the public. My name is Bill Hunter. I'll be chairing today's hearings, and you can address me by my name or as chair. With me are panel members to my left, Jocelyn Chander. To my far left, Martin Vervoort. To my right, Beth Henderson. To my far right, Terry Otto. The procedure for the hearings will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on screen from time to time are the applications we'll hear today. For the sake of efficiency, I may deal with agenda items in a different order. Panel members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll hear any oral submissions relating to the applications. The panel may ask for a brief presentation of an application, followed by questions for the applicant and city planning staff. We will then hear from members of the public who have registered to speak, and we may also have questions for them. Finally, the applicant, who has the burden of proof, will have an opportunity to make the final comments in reply. Please address your comments to me as the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. All presentations are limited to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at my discretion. At the end of the hearing, the panel may either make an oral decision or we may reserve our decision, which means it won't be delivered today. In either case, and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send the official written decision and reasons for it to all the parties, participants, and anyone else who has requested a copy. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure we will be following today? All right, we have several applications to hear today, but first we need to deal with some preliminary and procedural matters. Are there any declarations of interest, panel members? No, there are none. Are there any minutes of previous meetings to confirm?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have the minutes of August 1st and August 15th to approve.
Okay. And I believe we have seen those. Is that correct?
Yes, you have.
Okay. Do we approve those, members of the panel? Yes.
I'm in favor of the minutes of August 15th. I was away for the meeting of August 1st.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. River. Are the minutes approved for the August 15th and the August the 1st meeting? Okay. Thank you very much. We have received some requests to adjourn, which means to postpone to a different day the hearing for them. And what I will do is start to go through the agenda, and we'll deal with the request to adjourn first. And the first request to adjourn is item number 1. And I'd like to hear from planning with regard to that, but also there doesn't appear to be a verbal oath for the sign posting agreement. Is there somebody here who can do that? Item number 1 would be Agent A. Francis, D. Wilson, K. Harold. Are any of those people here?
Mr. Chair, just to confirm, the sign posting declaration is not required if an item is being adjourned.
Okay. Said here that it was, but nevertheless, that's fine. Okay. Planning staff wants it to be adjourned. Could planning staff come ahead, please, and give the basis for that request?
Just to confirm, this is for 363 Entrepreneur.
Okay.
Is that correct? That's the item we're speaking to?
I'm sorry.
What's the address of this item that we're speaking to?
The address of the item is 363 Entrepreneur. You're quite correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Go ahead.
So planning has been in communication with the applicant. We had 2 reasons to request the adjournment. One was to correct an issue with the environmental impact statement. That has since been corrected, and staff no longer have concerns with the environmental impact statement. However, there is the matter of the watercourse setback variance was not on the initial variance application. So at the discretion of the committee, I'm not sure if we need to have recirculation to add that watercourse setback variance to the to the request. So for that reason, we're requesting an adjournment, that setback variance be added to the application before we can properly hear this application.
All right, okay. Somebody for the applicant, speak to that? I need to put on your microphone if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Are you able to hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and panel members. This is Alice Mihailescu. The last name is Mihailescu. And I'm here with the applicant and Kyle Harold and Anthony Francis. And just to speak on the portion of the water course, it is our understanding that the concern is with section 69 of the bylaw. But we want to raise that subsection 3 specifically addresses where site plan is required. And that if site plan is required and the city is satisfied that it's in conformance with the official plan and the provisions relating to that, that it can be approved as a result. So this is an application that is dealing with site plan and that these issues would be addressed with site plan. So as such, we are not, we'd like to hear more about moving this forward today.
In other words, you don't want it adjourned today.
Correct.
Yes, okay. Planning, Mr. Graham, to have a response?
My concern was just out of, I was concerned that the application may have issues being approved at the building code stage, but if the applicant is confident that there will be no issues moving forward with that request, then I'm comfortable moving forward with the application today.
So we don't need to adjourn this then, Mr. Graham, from your point of view now?
At this stage, I would leave it up to the discretion of the applicant.
Up to the applicant. Okay, the applicant doesn't want it adjourned, so.
Correct.
Go
We're okay
ahead.
to move today.
Members of the panel, any questions or comments? No? No? Can we grant this request? We'll hear it. Can we grant? Guess we have to hear it, yeah. We have to hear it. We've heard the part about the adjournment. And it's not going to be adjourned, I guess, so far. But could I hear the grounds for the request, the application?
Mr. Chair, I suggest we step it down and call it back in order.
Okay, it is number 1.
We have 2 other adjournment requests to address
All right.
first.
Okay. Thank you. We'll call you back. We have a procedure that we deal with the adjournment request first. And the next adjournment request is item number 3, which is 2523 Manse. And planning has asked for an adjournment. Is it Mr. Graham again could I ask for your comments, sir?
Thank you, Chair. We did receive updated application information from the applicant, and I would like to withdraw the request to adjourn.
Okay, thank you very much for advising. Is there somebody here for the applicant? No?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's Chris Yalkotzy, Jalkotzy. I'm acting for the applicant.
Okay. I don't see you on my screen, but maybe you're.
Yeah. I'm not sure why the video is not running. There we go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Apologize.
We're all right. Okay. So the request to adjourn has been withdrawn. Members of the panel, any questions or comments?
I was just going to say we can deal with it in order if the applicant wants to proceed, which I assume is the case.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right. That's fine. We can deal with it in order. Okay, the last request to adjourn is item number 7, the 6 White Cedar. And that's planning, Mr. Graham, I presume. Again, could you deal with that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there were two reasons that planning has requested adjournment for this item. The first reason is due to an additional variance that we believe the applicant requires in order to move forward with the construction project, that the exterior wall height variance be added to their application. And the second reason was requested by right-of-way staff. They noted that the entranceway has been expanded without appropriate approvals. And in addition to that, front yard parking has been established in front of the dwelling, which is not permitted. So in light of those issues, the right-of-way department requests that the application be adjourned until these contraventions of the bylaws are corrected.
Okay, I think the agent for the applicant is Mr. Jay Reno.
Speaking.
Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to comment on this, sir?
I do have 2 points, and then, up to the decision of the planner and the committee to continue with the adjournment. The first is to address the issue from the right-of-way committee, whereas the driveway was not expanded, it's actually 3/4 gravel with grass in it. It's not asphalt or anything permanent. It's just gravel that's sitting beyond the property line. And the second was that the proposal is actually a shed roof, which the building height walls would be allowed under the 3.2 meter restriction. However, that is entirely up to, the committee and the planner if that shed dormer on top of that is a building code item or if it is a variance item. I didn't see anything in the bylaws to contradict the fact that it could be separate from the 3.2 meter wall, as it's a separate entity. Yeah.
Okay, could I hear from you again, Mr. Graham, on that, please?
Regarding the paving, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of the site itself. The comment was requested by right-of-way, so I can't speak to the specifics of the violation. As for the exterior wall, my concern for this application, again, was that the applicant may run into issues once making it to the building permit stage. So I'm not an engineer. I don't know how the definition of the exterior wall would change between the existing garage height and this shed dormer. But my concern for the applicant was that they would have to seek another variance once they get to the building permit stage and may receive a notice of zoning deficiency if they don't have that variance. So if the applicant is confident that they'd like to move forward on those grounds, that's their decision. As for right-of-way issues, the initial comments still stand that we would like those concerns to be corrected before hearing the application.
Anything further from the applicant?
I suppose just that in that case, just to be able to provide the right information to the right-of-way committee or the department, that we would adjourn in this case, just to have that extra time to review it with them so that, again, that doesn't become a problem farther down the road.
So do I understand from that, sir, that you're not opposed to an adjournment?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Members of the panel, any questions or comments?
In this case, Mr. Chair, I suggest maybe that we adjourn this to a fixed date, because if it's determined that that additional variance isn't needed, then we wouldn't have to recirculate.
What if it is needed? I don't know if we have to recirculate or not, Mr. Verwoerd.
Well, then it would, if we have to recirculate, then it would have to, then it would just have to be
Signed.
withdrawn and then recirculated at that point, but it may not be necessary. I'm just trying to make sure that if it's not necessary, the applicant doesn't have to go through recirculation and pay the fee again.
Yes, well, we don't want that to happen if it's not necessary.
So if
But-
we put it over for, I was thinking if we put it over for 2 weeks or a month, that then we can get some clarity on that point.
Planning, could I have your comments as to whether we should do sine die or put it over for 2 weeks or a month or some other time?
Mr. Chair, I believe 2 weeks would be appropriate, an amount of time to hear from further comments from right-of-way to see if any further corrections are needed. And also I can inquire with zoning plan staff to see if that additional variance is needed. So 2 weeks, I believe, is appropriate.
Okay, are you okay with that, Mr. Reno?
Yes, sir. 2 weeks is an appropriate amount of time.
Any other questions or comments from planning members, panel members? No. Okay, we can adjourn to 2 weeks would be, what's the date?
That would be October 3rd.
2 weeks to October 3rd. Okay, that's done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have two unopposed applications, which I'd like to deal with next. Item number 5, 2490 B River. And the applicant here to speak is, could I have the name of?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Zuzana Kasarova. I work for Susan Smith, and the office is at 941 Maryville Road, and I'm the authorized agent of the owners
Okay,
right beside me.
thank you. Since it's unopposed and there are no adverse comments, panel members, have you any questions or comments? No?
No.
Can we grant this? It's granted.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you
very
very much.
Thank you very much. The one other unopposed is item number 6, 95 Martin. Is there somebody here that can speak to that?
My name is Mario Aymon, 95 Martin Street in Richmond. All I really want to do is a double car garage with a mudroom.
Right. And we have an in support comment and nobody's opposing it. Members of the panel, any comments or questions? This one. Can we grant this? Yes, it's granted, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's go back to item number 1 then is 363 Entrepreneur. Who is going to be the spokesperson?
I will speak.
Okay.
Kyle Harold, Herold.
Okay. Could you just review the application briefly, sir, if you wouldn't mind?
Yep, absolutely. The initial minor variance application was for the request of two modifications to the setbacks. First being a reduction in the side yard setback from 3 meters to 1.5. The second being a rear yard setback from 15 meters to, I believe it is 6.8.
Okay. And I see on my comments, if I could ask you something before I ask planning.
Of course.
Or my friends on the panel. That the agent doesn't agree with the requested conditions, cash in lieu and EIS.
Mr. Chair, there are no requested conditions on this one.
There are no, I'm sorry, yes. I'm flipping over to number 2 already. Yeah, okay, that's good. Planning, can I have your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the updated EIS that was submitted after we had some back and forth with the applicant, that was reviewed and approved. So staff no longer have concerns with the environmental impacts of the application. As noted before, we suggested that the section 69 of the bylaw be addressed in the variance, but the applicant wishes to proceed. So we have no further concerns from planning.
Before we go any further, Mr. Chair, we haven't received a sign posting declaration for this item. Could you read the oath?
Yes.
Will be provided at our next convenience. I was under the impression that it was. If it wasn't, we'll.
Just to confirm, you don't have to provide anything if you can respond to the oath verbally right now.
Yes. Then that was provided.
Sorry, has it been provided?
Yes, that is correct. Has it not?
We don't have it on file, so it would be best just to read the oath out now.
Perhaps I'm misunderstanding. Could you review the oath that's required? I was under the impression that
Yeah.
that was provided prior to this hearing.
I don't seem to have a copy with me. You got a copy of the oath? Okay, Mr. Harold,
Correct.
do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
I swear.
Thank you. Members of the panel, questions, comments? No? Can we grant it? Yes.
I do believe in the initial discussion, there was some talk about the site plan and dealing with section 69. I believe that's what the city planners are not in favor of. Could we have some discussion on that from the panel, please? Or from the applicants?
Section 69 refers to the watercourse setback, which you've heard we've been back and forth with the city for a number of months now. Essentially, during the initial discussions, that setback was recommended to be 15 meters. However, we have performed the necessary investigation studies. I can have Anthony Francis comment a little bit more in order to provide proper information to support the reduction of that setback. Anthony?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Sorry, Jocelyn had her, sorry, Ms. Chandler had her hand up. No,
No, I thought you wanted to make a comment. You put
I'm
your
happy
hand.
to, yes.
Could I have your name first, please, sir?
Sorry, Anthony Francis with Kilgore and Associates.
Thank you.
The water course is a very, very minor feature. It is highly contaminated with the salt from the adjacent snow dump. It is not habitat for anything. 5 meters is a very appropriate setback for that feature.
Ms. Chandler.
So maybe just to clarify for everyone, the city planner's concern is whether a variance to reduce the setback from 30 is required. However, the official plan says if you're going through site plan control, those setbacks can be reduced provided the appropriate process has gone through, providing an EIS. This application is going through a site plan. They are dealing with the setback within the city. So the Committee of Adjustment does not need to provide a variance to reduce the setback from 30. And that's why the planner is indicating it was a concern, but if they're going through the site plan, it's not something that needs to be brought before this committee. So the watercourse setback isn't for us to consider.
So it can be approved as is.
Yeah, it's not really part of this
Yes.
application and does not need to be.
Okay, Mr. Vera?
I was just going to say, I believe Mr. Graham indicated that he's not 100% sure that there won't be an issue because they may need a variance for the watercourse setback as well. However, the applicants seem confident that they can go ahead and address that through the site plan process. So if the applicant wants to take their chances, I guess, so to speak, I'm in favor of moving ahead with the application.
Okay. Mr. Otto, you raised that question. Has that been answered or have you got other questions?
Yes, I'm perfectly okay with it now, as long as the applicant's aware that they could have problems later down the line. Thank you very much.
Ms. Henderson, are you okay? Can we grant this as it is?
Yes.
Okay, granted. Thank you.
thank you.
Now, the next one is 32523 Manse. Is there somebody here to speak to that?
Mr. Chair, we're on 541 Somme, item number 2.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I have your name, please, sir?
Mr. Chair, my name is Saeed Saya. Applicant. We're representing the applicant, and with me is Jennifer Ailey from Tomlinson Development Corporation,
Yes,
also representing the applicant.
okay. Would you like to speak to this matter for us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I did send the committee a presentation, if it's possible to bring that up on screen and to give you some background, if possible. Thank you. So I'd like to walk you through a little bit of the history of the site and sort of bringing us to where we're getting to with the proposed severance today. This isn't that dramatic of a history, but I think it's important and speaks to why we are respectfully disagreeing with our colleagues in planning on the 2 conditions that are still being requested. Next slide, please. So the subject site is sort of southeast of the Ottawa Airport in the Hawthorne Industrial Park. You could see here on the official plan schedule that it is surrounded by sand and gravel, by bedrock resource area. And we'll see in the next slide, please, that it's also zoned heavy rural industrial. Next slide. Here we could see the zoning overlaid on an aerial photograph. Again, illustrating the site is zoned heavy industrial, and to give you an idea of the extent of the industrial and extraction related uses surrounding the site, with some agricultural uses directly to the east. Next slide. This is an outline of a subdivision that was approved in 2009 and includes the subject lands that were previously highlighted. In the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see lightly outlined the parcel or the block, I apologize, that we're looking to sever. Next slide. So this is the location of the subject lands and the proposed severed lot with the retained lot next to it. I'd like to state that the lot to be severed is approximately 1.6 hectares. It exceeds all zoning requirements, and the retained lot is 3.8 hectares. Next slide. This is just a view of the site from the road, one taken in 2019, grabbed from Google Earth, and the other one just last month when we were posting the sign, just to give you some idea of what the site looks like. It's mostly hard gravel with very minimal vegetation on it. Next slide. Now, I'd like to go back to the subdivision agreement and speak to why we disagree about the 2 conditions, one regarding the parkland and the second for the environmental impact statement. First of all, the subdivision does provide a 30-centimeter reserve that is going to continue to be transferred to the city following this severance. And what that means is that proper servicing studies will be required, as well as site plan control before the reserve can be lifted. The planning department does have an opportunity at that time to request and receive cash in lieu of parkland at that particular time. I would also note that when the subdivision was approved, the applicant did pay cash in lieu of parkland as well in 2009 upon registration of the subdivision agreement. Next slide. With respect to the environmental impact statement, here's a list of some of the studies that were approved and form part of the subdivision agreement, again, that was approved by the planning department. These include stormwater management plans, geotechnical studies, and with some correspondence also between the South Nation Conservation Authority, which I will come back to briefly, tree preservation protection plans, and a fish habitat enhancement strategy was also included as part of the registered subdivision agreement. Next slide. This is the evaluated wetlands and water surface features that are shown on Geo Ottawa. And as you can see, we do have a stream running through part of the site. And but there's nothing that impacts the lands that are before you today. Next slide. This excerpt from Geo Ottawa shows the unevaluated wetlands that are illustrated on in that particular layer of the GIS database. With when we overlay that with with what's actually happening or what exists on the site, you can obviously see that there's no wetland for the majority of this area. And just going back to some of the basics of the application, I would like to remind you that the parcel does meet, it actually exceeds all the zoning requirements of the site. The subdivision itself does speak to a minimum lot area that should be considered for water quality and geotechnical purposes. And this is double those standards. So the minimum area in the subdivision agreement is 0.8 hectares. The smaller lot that we're proposing is 1.6 hectares, double the size. Again, a site plan is required. Again, there is a 30 centimeter reserve in place. And lastly, I would like to highlight that the South Nation Conservation Authority, who also, or who is responsible for evaluating wetlands and regulating this part of the project, did review the proposal and had no concerns with the with any impact on wetlands or water quality in this particular part of the subdivision. Next slide. And here we're just lightly superimposing the severed lot lines over what exists on the site today. And so just to give you an idea of the area that we are looking at. And just before I conclude, if I could just take a step back, the applicant is not developing these lands per se. The applicant has an agreement of purchase and sale with a commercial operation who wishes to build a small industrial facility on the site and understands that they do have to go through site plan approval and satisfy all of the city's requirements at this time. So it's our hope that the committee would approve the request for a severance and make this transaction as straightforward as possible so that the lands can be transferred to the new owner and they can undergo and complete these studies at the appropriate time. And again, we believe that's through the site plan control process. And I believe that's it. Next slide. I think, yep, that's also thank you. And we're available for any questions.
Okay. Could I hear from planning, please? Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The parkland dedication bylaws states that we're to take parkland or cash in lieu parkland dedication at the earliest opportunity possible. And as this is a Planning Act application, this is an opportunity for us to take parkland dedication. So we believe that the cash in lieu should be paid at this point in time for the newly created lot. As for the environmental impact statement question, the city's mapping, as was shown on the slides, shows that there are unevaluated wetlands here, as well as a water course that runs adjacent to the property. Official plan policy, section 5.6.4.1 states that adjacent to those water features, we are to ensure that development does not have negative impacts on environmental features. We do not rely on aerial photography for these questions, so we are requesting an EIS to ensure that these features can be divided, because the city does not support dividing these natural features. So we need to ensure that these new lot lines will not divide wetlands, or if they do such in a way that no negative impacts are expected to come from the lots. Site plan is not necessarily required for this lot. If they get a hydro-G and lift the reserve, and then they as of right are allowed to build a 300 square meter building without going through the site plan process. So the the city has an opportunity now to ensure that these studies are undertaken. So we believe that they should be undertaken at this point in time.
Mr. Saya, would you like to make a response at all to that?
If I could respond to a couple of points, Mr. Chair.
Of course.
The zoning bylaw does require a 30-meter setback from any water course that would obviously be respected on the site should the water course be identified. And again, the applicant is the owner of the entire subdivision, and there are various conditions related to the habitat, water conditions, stormwater drainage on the site that both the existing owner and the new owner would have to comply to. Theoretically, if the new owner were to go through those studies, the reserve possibly could be lifted. However, it is their intent to build a new facility that does require site plan control. So we're not trying to skirt around any process here. We would just like the studies to apply at the time when they, to apply at the time and be conducted by the party that's, that's most capable of addressing those issues. Again, it's not the applicant that's proposing the new building. It's going to be the purchaser after this application is hopefully approved.
Panel members, any comments or questions? Yes, please.
Sir, sorry, did you say that the parkland dedication was already paid for in 2009 when the subdivision?
That's correct. There was a payment made in 2009 when the subdivision was registered.
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that an applicant or an owner of land, et cetera, is only required to pay cash in lieu once on a piece of land for parkland. Is that correct?
No, that's my understanding. However, I'm not sure how nuanced this gets when we're severing the land and we've created two parcels. And so our view is that we've paid parkland already on the site. And that again, when this goes through site plan control, the planning department can have an opportunity at that time to pursue parkland if they find it's necessary.
So perhaps the city planner would like to comment on that. I was under the impression the city is only able to obtain cash in lieu once on a piece of land.
Mr. Chair, my understanding is that new lots create a new opportunity or a new requirement for cash in lieu to be created. So it's not the land itself that permanently is exempt from cash in lieu once it's paid for that land, but if a new lot is created, then there's a new cash in lieu requirement as per the parkland dedication bylaw.
Any other? Yes, Ms. Chandler.
I'm inclined in my experience to agree with the city planner that new lot creation triggers cash in lieu, and we do as typically require it through the severance process because this is where the lot is created. So I would include the cash in lieu in the conditions. The EIS is a little bit more interesting. So the 30-meter setback off of the water course would apply unless you go through site plan, in which case that'll be dealt with through site plan. It's not clear to me what the concern is. The site would have been addressed from an environmental perspective in terms of creating that lot through the subdivision agreement. The site has been heavily modified and cleared, and I'm not sure why dividing this lot in two, given the substantial size, would trigger concerns relating to an EIS. So I'm not inclined to support the requirement for an EIS here, given that it's fairly recently in terms of planning applications gone through a full subdivision process. But that would be my position. So to leave the cash in lieu in and remove the EIS condition.
Any other comment? Yes, Mr. Vervoort.
I agree with everything that Ms. Chandler just said, and that's what I was going to say, but she said it much more eloquently than I could have.
Okay. Any other comments from panel members? Mr. Graham, would you like to respond to this, please? The cash in lieu, I think we've sort of dealt with that. You've dealt with that, but the EIS, if you could comment on that, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the request for the EIS is due to the unevaluated wetlands have not been thoroughly examined, so we don't know the extent of the wetlands, whether they exist at all, whether they encroach just on one of the parcels, on either of the parcels. So in order to support this law creation, the city would like to see an EIS that outlines those features and ensures that no negative impacts will arise out of this development. That's the request from planning.
Could that be dealt with at the site plan level?
Through a site plan process, an EIS would likely be required. But as I stated, it is not strictly necessary for site plan for this lot. There are some development opportunities that could avoid an EIS, and that's why planning is asking for this at this point.
Mr. Saya, if you have any comments, I would like to hear them.
Respectfully, Chair, those development opportunities exist now with or without the severance on the site. The severance in this case and the purchaser are intending to go through site plan control and will undertake an EIS at that time. We do think it's onerous to request our client to undertake that study prior to the severance, especially given all of the work and reports that have been previously completed for the registered plan of subdivision.
Members of the panel, should we reserve? For grant, what are your thoughts? Reserve?
I don't know how the other members of the panel feel, but I think Ms. Chandler and I were in favor of the application without the EIS requirement, and I don't know if everybody's agreed.
Well, I don't know either. This, some of the things we talk about when we reserve. Exactly.
Okay.
We'll reserve, Mr. Saya. Thank you for very clearly outlining your client's viewpoint on this. Appreciate
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Okay, now we deal with number 3, which is 2523 Manse.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. It's Chris Yalkotzi again. Unfortunately, for some reason, my camera is not, there we go.
There we go. Well,
thank you.
You were there for a minute.
My name is Chris Yalkotzi. I'm acting for the owner of the property. My address is 51 Rothwell Drive.
Would you like to just give us a brief overview of the application, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, please put up the present. So what you're looking at the bottom of the screen is the site location. It's in the village in the official plan and schedule C11C. It is not part of any natural heritage system and doesn't trigger a requirement for an environmental impact study. Up the upper left-hand corner, you have the property highlighted. The property is adjacent to the Ottawa River. And in the upper left-hand corner, you see the aerial for the property with an older existing dwelling, which will be demolished as part of the application to construct a new building. Next slide, please. It does not fall close to any particular environmental constraints. So if you're looking at the upper right left-hand corner, and in the lower left or right-hand corner, it is in Schedule D9, Rural Transact Area, and it's part of the Village of Cumberland. Next slide, please. The minor variance is being requested for the distance from the high water mark. to the septic bed system. And in addition, a minor variance for the distance 30 meters from the high water mark to the corner of the building. As you can see that the building only slightly encroaches on that 30-meter line. I should say that there is support from the Conservation Authority. We have various letters of approval for the septic bed system and for all of the aspects around the environmental conditions. Next slide, please. So I would say that the requested the variances are minor in the sense that they reflect the current character of the neighborhood. There are some new single-family homes being built in this area, and the variance is quite minor. The general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained as single-family detached dwellings are permitted in this zone. The intent of the official plan is maintained in the sense that the setbacks of the waterways have been reviewed, and various studies have been completed to show that they will not have an impact on the natural heritage features. I should say that we added with the planner a condition or a statement that a naturalized landscape plan will be provided as part of the building permit application, and that finally the Ontario Planning Act supports development in residential urban areas.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Graham, could I have your comments?
Chair. Yes, we've been in contact with the applicant, and our initial request for an adjournment is no longer applicable, so we have no further concerns with the application.
Okay. Panel members, any comments or questions? Ms. Chandler.
I don't have any concerns with the application, but I would like for the record in the decision that, in my opinion, the test for the minor variance that have been presented by the applicant in terms of being in keeping with the zoning bylaw, that should be placed against the watercourse setback component of the zoning bylaw, where the intent is relating to water quality and environmental protection. While I don't disagree that it meets that test, the test is not against the one that's shown in the application submission.
Any other comments or questions, panel members? No. Can we grant this application? Granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and panel.
The next one is 1876 Division Street. Lou Laundry.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Bonjour, the committee and Mr. Chairman. My name is Luke Laundry, 1919 Force Road.
Would you like to comment on this application, please, Mr. Laundry?
Yes, the owners wish to convey a portion of his land to his neighbor. In this case, the owners are the same owner owns the two houses. So between neighbors, so he wishes to convey a portion of his land and from 1876 Division Street to 5808 Rockdale Road. The city has sent conditions, and we have read and understood them. Thank you.
Are you in favor of the conditions?
Yes, we have spoke with staff to clarify a few points, and we are in favor.
Okay. Could I hear from planning, please? Mr. Graham? No.
That's for me, actually. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we just have some concerns over there being enough room for replacement septic systems to be put on the property should the existing ones fail. We just want to make sure that there's enough space. And the official plan requires 800 square meters.
Okay, those are the concerns?
That's about it in terms of concerns. Yeah.
Now, if the applicant has agreed to the conditions, does that satisfy the planning department then?
I believe so.
Okay, so other than that, if the conditions are met, planning department doesn't have any objections?
That's correct.
Okay. Members of the panel, questions, comments?
I think as long as we include the conservation partner condition, that the conceptual design conforms to the building code. Do we need that or not? That was my question.
Ms. Chandler?
I think it's a reasonable question, but I'm not sure how it's satisfied, what conceptual design is being requested. Like, there's two properties here with existing
Yes.
sewage systems, so there's nothing conceptual about this. So what satisfies this condition?
Mr. Chair, may
Yes.
I say?
Yes.
Yes, so when the applicant decided to where he will draw the line, I have a bit of experience. So the first thing we address is make sure we are very far away from the septic tank and the runs. And we measured, and on one side, there's a minimum of 13 meters, and on the other side is a minimum of 9 meters. And yesterday to the South Nation is that distance may not require that. And that was the key as to where we draw that line. Not anything else, but stay away from the septic. That is my comment.
Does that help you, Ms. Chandler?
Well,
Is
it
there a
speaks
concern?
to what is it that they're asking the applicant to do to satisfy this condition?
He seems to accept the conditions.
Do you understand what you would have to do for the?
That condition was discussed late yesterday afternoon with South Nation, but it is not in the written document. They stated that they may ask for it just today type of thing.
If you are comfortable with it, that's fine.
Okay, any other questions? Can we approve this thing granted? Oh, sorry, Mr. River. Oh, granted, okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I need just to understand for myself and the owners, the South Nation request from yesterday was not part of the condition. Is it removed, or you're asking us for a conceptual design that would highlight the distance between the septic?
Well, it's not part of what, like, we don't have that request in front of us.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Mr. Chair, we do have James Holland on the call. Perhaps he can answer some questions.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, sorry, James, I didn't know you were with us.
I didn't either. So there you are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a rough conceptual design submitted with the application that we saw. It does indicate setback distances from property lines for the septic systems. There are two. They seem to be generous, but normally we do get a review by the Ottawa Septic Systems Office, and we didn't receive that in this case. So I'm just asking for them to finish their review and to confirm that there's no concerns. There is the potential that they will look at it and say, we need this to be confirmed in more detail. So the condition, conceptual design may require a little bit more detail to finalize. But at this point, I'm just looking for them to have completed their review and confirm whether or not that's required.
And that hasn't been done yet, obviously, sir.
No, so the OSSO hasn't finished their review.
So adjourn this, members of the panel? No? Prove it? Ms. Chandler, go ahead. Make your comment, please.
If the applicant has an agreement with South Nation on how this is going to be addressed and he's comfortable with it, then I'm fine with granting it with that condition personally.
I'm not sure there's an agreement yet, is there? Is there an agreement yet with South Nation?
So my understanding, Mr. Chair, through you, is that the agreement is simply that they would provide something from OSSO that demonstrates that, you know, what's proposed is acceptable. And we would clear that with the committee.
So, Mr. Holland, is it just when we submit the survey that we indicate the distance between the septic run and the new property line? Is Is that the end result?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that's what the OSSO is going to want to see.
If that's the case, sir, his request is reasonable. If required, we can add the language that was submitted late yesterday afternoon.
Okay,
As long as it's if required, because they haven't done their review, correct, Mr. Holland?
That is correct.
okay. Is there anything in writing about this agreement, or is this just a verbal, talk back and forth?
No, there is wording that was,
Okay,
there is wording that was submitted, correct, Mr. Holland?
Yes, there is a requested condition there.
good. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, can we grant this, members of the committee? Yes.
Mr. Chair, maybe for clarification, you could just read that conservation condition out. Condition number 3 on the sheet.
Conservation requested by the conservation partners. Number 3. Owner provides confirmation from the Ottawa Septic Systems Office that the conceptual design conforms to the Ontario Building Code. That's one of the conditions,
Correct.
which you saw, and you're happy with that, sir.
If required, right? So we need to start the paragraph with if required.
Well, it doesn't say that. I just read the condition as it says.
Yes, sir. That's why I'm saying I would like to ask if required, because if they haven't finished their study, it may not be required.
Ms. Chandler?
Okay, I think I've got this sorted.
Good.
South Nation is saying that the drawing you submitted with the application, which shows your measured setbacks, is with the Ottawa Septic System right now, the office right now. The Septic System Office normally reviews these and indicates to the Conservation Authority whether they agree that this is reasonable and that the location of the lot lines is appropriate. In this case, South Nation has not received that confirmation. So the way this condition is worded is there's no if required here. It's that you receive from the Ottawa Septic System Office an indication that what you've submitted already, the drawing, is okay, in that you're meeting the setbacks. So the question to you very clearly would be, if you are very confident in the distances that you are measured, accepting this condition should not be a concern, because in time, the Septic System Office will indicate to the Conservation Authority that they agree. The risk you are taking is that if your measurements are way off and that septic system is closer to one of your proposed lot lines, that will complicate your completion of this lot line adjustment significantly. So the condition can stand if you are very comfortable with your setbacks that you've shown. And in time, South Nation will clear that condition based on the Ottawa Septic System Office reviewing your drawing. You don't have to do anything further. Am I correct, Mr. Holland?
Yes, thank you very much. That was very clear. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
I think we all needed it.
Are you okay with that, sir?
Yes.
The applicant's okay with that? Okay, so the condition is as is. All in favor? Yes, granted. Okay, good. That's number 4 done, 5, we've done 6 done, we've 7 done. Number 8. Number 8 is 4085 Dunning. Could I have your name, please, sir?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. Paul Robinson. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, and I have with me Mr. Brian Coburn, who is the property owner to which this land is proposed to be transferred.
Okay. Would you like to go over the application?
Yes, if the coordinator could put up the presentation material, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Next page, please. So what you have before you is the properties at 4085 and 4095 Dunning Road. The 4085 Dunning Road is the larger parcel shown in a sort of bright green color. It's approximately, I think it's about 128 acres or almost 52 hectares. There is a farmhouse on the property, and it has frontage on Dunning Road, and also has frontage on a property road to the east. The intent is to transfer a small portion of land that's shown in a purple outline where it says land to be conveyed to Mr. and Mrs. Coburn. And if you go to the next slide, there's some more details. So here's another image. The image on the left is from the survey plan. You can see the land in question that Mr. Quayle owns, who is the owner of the 52 hectare parcel of land. It's shown in green, and the small portion of land that is to be transferred to Mr. and Mrs. Coburn is shown as in red. And it is on to the rear of their property. And there is a laneway for Mr. Quayle to get out to Dunning Road. So the land in question that is to be transferred is approximately 0.16 of a hectare or 0.4 of an acre. And it will bring Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's property into conformity with the RR5 zoning that they have right now. Their property is 0.24 hectares in size now. By adding this 0.16, it would go to 0.4 hectares, which is the minimum for a property in the RR5 zone. So, and there are some photos which will explain the reasoning behind this lot line adjustment. They could go to the next slide, please. So this is a survey plan. The area in purple is Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's land now. The area in red is the land that they are going to be receiving from the property owner whose land is shown in green, which is a somewhat unusual shape. It has frontage on a small bit of frontage on the laneway through a laneway to Dunning Road. There is an area that we have shown as parts 2 and part 3, which are listed as proposed road widenings, which were listed as conditions by the planning department, and we expected this already. There is a ditch, a drainage ditch that you can see that we've outlined in blue on this. And that ditch is used by Mr. Quayle in his farming operations. And that ditch is to remain. So there's no impact on that. And then I believe there was a severance or a lot line adjustment in the past on the property to the south, which began as a sort of a rectangular parcel of land. And then additional lands were added to the south and east that aligned with the ditch and the water courses in the area. Next slide, please. So the photo on the left, which I took, is looking to the west, and the laneway for 4085 is on the right. And that is the access that Mr. Quayle has to Dunning Road. And then on the left, there is a dome-shaped building, or it's also on the survey plan, it's indicated as a coverall. And that is where Mr. Coburn stores, it's just gravel, and it's just a sort of a framed, very loose frame. And he stores his RV. He also, it's where equipment for clearing the lane is stored. It's also where lumber is stored and wood that is stored for Mr. Coburn. That is used in his hobby, in which he makes wood items that are then given to the Pearly Robertson, the Pearly Hospital, and are sold in their store. So it's where he stores all that. The image, the photo on the right is turned around 180 degrees. It is looking to the east. So the laneway for 4085 is on the left. The red line is the proposed west edge of the lands to be transferred to Mr. and Mrs. Coburn. And the reason, what happened is that in about 2008, Mr. Quayle started planting trees on the subject property. And you can see the trees on the right, they're now about 15 years old. And the trees were planted as a windbreak. And then sometime between 2011 and 2014, Mr. and Mrs. Coburn put up the sort of dome building that's there, the shelter that's there now. And they did it they were always under the understanding that these were their lands anyway. Lands to the north, on the north side of the laneway, their rear lot line roughly aligns with the proposed rear lot line of the lands that Mr. and Mrs. Coburn are wanting to obtain. And they always thought that these were their lands, so they put this sort of temporary structure on the property. And then the property that is subject to this lot line adjustment has always been too small for any sort of agricultural production. It's too small to turn a tractor around. It was used as a tree planting area for a windbreak from the winter winds coming from the east. And also there was always when they started this application, it was always imperative that the ditch that is to the east remain on Mr. Quayle's property. It's used for tile drainage, and it's quite imperative that that's on his property. So there's this structure or temporary building that's on Mr. Quayle's property that's used by Mr. and Mrs. Coburn. They want to resolve all of this and have it into their ownership. And that is the fundamental reason behind it. The drainage ditch will be on Mr. Quayle's property. The laneway will still be under Mr. Quayle's ownership, and it tidies up things in this area. And also it brings Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's property into zoning conformity in terms of a minimum lot area. I think there's a couple more slides. So this is a view of the sort of coverall or shelter that's there now. That the image on the left is looking to the south, and then the image on the right is on the south side of the coverall looking to the north. So you can see that it doesn't have any, there's no base to it. It's just gravel, and it's where they store their RV and lumber for Mr. Coburn's hobby. And he also stores some equipment to clear the laneway. Next slides, please. This is just aerial imagery. This is, I think this is 2021 imagery, and you can see the trees have grown up, have matured over time, and you can see the coverall structure. And then you can see Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's house, which is their property is in purple. The zoning line is the red line. So everything to the right of it is in an agricultural zone, and to the left of it's in an RR5 zone, including a portion of Mr. Quayle's laneway where it meets the street. Next slide, please. This is 2014 imagery. You can see that the coverall structure is there in 2014, and the trees are starting to form. They were planted about 2008, and I think there's one more image. Oh, this is just a summary. The lands to be conveyed from Mr. Quayle to Mr. and Mrs. Coburn are in red. The lands, the receiving land is in purple. That's where Mr. and Mrs. Coburn live now. And the green outline is the lands that are the parent parcel, which Mr. Quayle owns. And that is presentation, and I'm available to answer questions. And I did indicate to the committee that there's a couple of conditions I'd like to speak about.
Okay, maybe I could hear from the planning first.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the donor lands in this situation are zoned and designated as agricultural lands, and the requirements for lot line adjustments in agricultural lands are quite strict. So they're only supposed to be approved for legal or technical reasons. The provincial policy statement defines legal or technical reasons as severances for purposes such as easements, corrections of deeds, quitclaims, and minor boundary adjustments which do not result in the creation of a new lot. So no new lot would be created in this situation. But the crux of this situation is whether this qualifies as a minor boundary adjustment, and it is planning's position that it does not meet that definition. So it is staff's position that the adjustment is not minor. The applicant is seeking to increase the lot size of the receiving lot by 65%, adding 1,630 square meters of prime agricultural land to the residential lot. This increase is substantial and not in accordance with the policies of the PPS or the official plan. And therefore, staff are recommending refusal of the application.
Hey, Mr. Robinson, would you like to comment on that? You said you had another couple of comments on the conditions. As well.
Yes, well, in terms of the minor boundary adjustment, by increasing the lot area of the receiving parcel from 0.24 hectares to 0.40 hectares, it brings it into conformity with the requirements for an RR5 zone. In terms of a minor boundary adjustment, we feel that this is a minor boundary adjustment. The entire parcel of Mr. Quayle, which is the parcel that is giving the land to Mr. and Mrs. Coburn, is almost 52 hectares. I believe the percentage is 0.3% of that property owner's lands are subject to this application. The lands have never been used for agricultural purposes. The sort of shape, size, and where they are in relation to a drainage ditch don't make it a very viable parcel component of land for agricultural uses. The lands have over time had trees. They were deliberately planted and they have grown and matured so that they provide an effective windbreak in the winter from the easterly winds to Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's property. So we found that this is a minor adjustment. It's 0.3% of the land is the subject to this. So that's our submission.
Mr. Graham, would you like to respond to the issue, I guess, whether it's a minor adjustment or major adjustment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the sake of minor in this situation, my perspective is that the minor is not relative only to the donor lands, but also to the receiving lands, or it should apply to both the recipient and the donor. The donor in this case, it may be minor for them, and it's a relatively small portion of the agricultural property, but the receiving lands will increase substantially by 60%. It increases their lot size, and there is nothing in the OP or the PPS to support bringing one lot into conformity while going against other policies of the PPS and the official plan. That is not a justification that is not a legal or technical reason by the definition of the PPS. So we do not believe this is minor in nature, and therefore we cannot support this from the city's perspective.
Members of the panel, any comments? Questions? Yes, Mr. Otto.
Yes, Chair, could we have the agent speak to his disagreement with 1 and 2? I believe he stated 1 in a roundabout way, but he hasn't gone into really detail on rezoning it. And also the agreement on the title and quality of the groundwater. Since it's an existing home, I don't see the need for that at all to be in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Otto. In terms of the zoning, the zoning in the area is quite complicated already in the fact that the property, the 52 hectare parcel is a split zoning technically already. It has primarily agricultural zoning, and then it has a small portion of RR5 zoning that roughly lines up with the east edge of Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's land now where the laneway is. So that property has split zoning. We're wanting to proceed with the current zoning that is on Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's property of RR5, and then the lands that are being transferred to them have an agricultural zoning. There's no permanent structures are proposed on it, and going through the city zoning process, There are two types of zoning applications that the committee here would deal with. One is that there's often, when you have surplus farm lots, there's a requirement to go through a zoning process whereby one of the parcels has to have zoning in place so that no additional homes can be built on it. That's about a $5,000 application fee. This going from, as what Mr. Graham is suggesting, to rezone the lands that would be transferred from an agricultural zone to an RR5 zone, that's a major rezoning. I looked up online. The current application fees would be $26,700, which seems onerous on a portion of land that is really the only person benefiting is Mr. and Mrs. Coburn. It's 0.6 of a hectare of land, and it's bringing that parcel of land into conformity with what parcels of land are supposed to have in terms of lot area for well and septic. So we do not want to have condition 1 put into the decision document. And as Mr. Otto said about condition 2, there is an existing well and septic on Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's land now. There is no need for any additional, and there is no sort of drain on the well or septic as a result of transferring this land. So that is another one that our stronger opposition is on condition number 1. But if the committee sees fit, then condition 2, it could be removed. As there was an item before panel 2, I think a couple of weeks ago, where they were talking about these sorts of agreements done by legal department, because I think the agreement for this either has to be prepared by legal or reviewed by legal, and they look at things in reverse order. So this application would have a 2-year time frame in which the conditions would have to be cleared. And the legal department at the city look at items that have got just a few months remaining before they are all cleared, and they deal with those first. And as the committee planner for panel 2 said, I think the last hearing, that they work in reverse order. The ones that they don't want to lose, or they don't want the severance to lapse, they deal with those first. And the ones that have got technically a 2-year time frame are not at the top of the pile to be reviewed and signed off on. So there is a timing on it as well. Mr. and Mrs. Coburn want to rectify this sort of inconsistency on the properties as soon as possible. So they'd like to clear the conditions. And this one has the potential to drag on for quite a few months. Thank you.
Ms. Chandler.
I don't have any issue with removing condition 2. I would like to reserve on this mainly because my concern about this application is we are either the location of the rear lot line, which runs through the forested or treed area, is more generous than is required to accommodate the additional infrastructure that's been put on the site. And you stated that, what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason for that location is that it brings the receiving land into conformity with the zoning. But you don't want to go through the zoning, which I fully understand. So to my mind, and this is perhaps why we should reserve, you either ask for the full area to bring yourself into compliance with the zoning, and you bring the zoning into compliance, or the lot line should have been as small as possible to simply accommodate the additional land that's required to accommodate your RV storage. And I can't sit on one side or the other of that at the moment without further discussion. But they aren't the same application and reasoning to my mind.
Mr. Robinson, would you like to comment on that, please?
The lot area has been made at 0.4 of a hectare, and it also lines up. It goes in as close a straight line as possible with the lots to the north, so that they all run in a sort of a straight line going from north to south. And it also comes to a point where the drainage ditch meets the natural place for the extension of the south lot line of Mr. and Mrs. Coburn's property. So that is, there were a number of moving parts there, and that was the reasoning behind having the lot, the shape and the proposed transfer, the shape and size that it is.
Comments, questions, members of the panel?
I'm in favor of reserving.
Favor of
Reserving?
yes. We will reserve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. for
Thank
your
you.
comments. Appreciate it. Thank you. Number 9. 4168 William McEwan. This was adjourned from September the 5th. And I think, do we have the signing declaration? No, so we need, is it Mr. Poulton?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you able to swear?
I am, yes. So my name is Ryan Poulton with Novatech at 240 Michael Copeland Drive, and I am able to take the oath.
And I'll just give you the oath if I might. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
Yes, I swear.
Thank you. Okay. Would you like to briefly go over application number 9, please?
Absolutely. So I provided a presentation, if it could go up on the screen. Thank you. Yes, my name is Ryan Poulton. I'm a planner at Novatech, and Novatech acted as the agent on behalf of the owners to prepare and file this application. Next slide, please. So the property is 4160 William McEwan Drive. It's a large rural lot that's just east of Highway 416. It's to the south of Barhaven. It's actually on the west side, west of 416. It's on the west side of William McEwan Drive. The majority of the property is forested, and you can see on the air photo, there's a hydro line corridor that goes northeast to southwest across the property near the frontage. As well, there's an existing house on the property. There's a garage and there's a couple sheds. Next slide, please. So this is an excerpt from the city's official plan. So you can see the property. The resolution is not great. Sorry about that. The property is designated rural countryside. Next slide, please. And then the property is zoned RU, which is rural countryside. So it's a rural property, rural countryside designation and zone rural countryside. Next slide, please. So this is an excerpt from our severance sketch. So as you can see, it's proposed to sever the property 50-50. The severed parcel is to the south, the retained parcel is to the north. The retained parcel will accommodate the existing dwelling, garage, and sheds. Again, you can see on this a little bit more clearly where the clearing is for the hydro corridor and how it creates land to the east of the hydro corridor near the William McEwan Drive. And that it's proposed to develop the southern parcel for future development. The area that's proposed to be developed is to the east of the hydro corridor on the severed lands. So now I'll speak to the criteria under the Planning Act. So in terms of criterion A, the application does have regard for matters of provincial interest, including the appropriate location for growth and development. With regard to criterion B, the severances are fully conforming to the zoning bylaw in terms of lot width and lot area for both the severed and retained lands in the RU zone. So the severance is not premature and is in the public's interest. Criterion C has to do with conforms to the official plan. So as discussed, the property is designated rural countryside. There's a number of different uses that are permitted in the rural countryside that are permitted as of right. It does include the existing house on the retained lands. As well, there's a number of uses that are permitted in the rural countryside designation through a zoning bylaw amendment application. As well, there's a variety of uses that are currently permitted under the current zoning of the property in the RU zone. For those reasons, the proposed severance conforms to the policies of the official plan. Criterion D, in terms of suitability of the land, again, the property is designated and zoned for rural uses. This application's for future development. The land is suitable for, in terms of the proposed severance. Conditions D1 and, sorry, criterion D1 and E don't apply. Criterion F has to do with the shape of the proposed lots. So again, it meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw in terms of lot width and lot area. Criterion G, in terms of restrictions on the lands, as mentioned, there is a hydro corridor that is a restriction on the current land. Criterion H, conservation of natural resources. The property is not within the floodplain. And an environmental impact study has been prepared in support of this application. And the recommendations of that report have been accepted by city staff. So there's no disagreement in terms of the environmental impact study that's been filed. Criterions I and J have to do with municipal service and school sites. Again, no impacts anticipated from the proposed severance on the adequacy of municipal services or school sites. And the remaining criterion K, L, and M don't apply. In terms of the provincial policy statement, the proposed severance is consistent with the policies of the PPS as explained in our covering letter. So next slide, please.
We don't have concerns with a lot of this. It was adjourned for another reason because the act had to be changed to the policy statement, whatever. But on the form that I have, it says agent doesn't agree with the requested conditions 1 to 5. Is that still the case? I haven't asked our planner that. Maybe it's not, but
I'm just going to double.
That's the information that I have. Maybe you could deal with that. You wouldn't mind?
Sure. I'm just going to double check the conditions.
1 to 5?
Yeah, I believe we do not have any issues with any of the conditions requested.
Okay, so
that is not the case now.
So you do agree with the conditions?
Yes, requested by city staff in their staff report.
Okay, and planner Mr. Teft, city doesn't have any objections, planning doesn't have any objections, I understand, as long as the conditions are met?
That's
That is
correct.
my understanding. Sorry, I guess they can speak to that.
Oh, that's fine. That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Yes, okay. Members of the panel, any questions or comments? No?
No.
Can we approve this?
Yes.
Granted. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
I think you're up next again.
Yes.
Yeah. 3388 Milton.
And so again, for the record, my name is Ryan Polton.
Excuse me just a minute, Mr. Pope.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Polton, I understand there are no concerns from planning on this. It does say on my sheet that I have that the agent does not agree with the conditions 1 to 4. Have you got those conditions there?
I do have the conditions, and that's we have comments on one of the 4 conditions.
Mr. Chair,
have to read
before we
the
get any
oath as well.
further, can we get the oath read for this item?
I gotta read the oath. So many things to do. You can take the oath, Mr. Polton?
Yes.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
Yes, I swear.
Okay, thank you. So back to the conditions then.
Okay.
I have on my sheet conditions 1 to 4, the applicant doesn't, or the agent doesn't agree to.
I think that might relate to the previous iteration of the planning report. However, we don't have concerns with conditions 1, 2, or 4, and we just have some comments with regard to condition 3.
Okay, so everything's fine, except you want to comment now on condition 3.
Yes, and this
Okay.
has to do with an agreement on title, and it speaks to the lands are next. The property is located next to lands that have an active railway line now, or may have one in the future, and may therefore be subject to noise, vibration, and other activities associated with that use.
Okay.
For the
Could you
record,
just say what your problem is with condition 3 briefly, please?
absolutely. So we've reviewed the trail, and again, the staff report characterized it as a recreational trail. There is currently no rail lines in that corridor. There's also the schedules on the official plan don't designate that corridor as a railway corridor. Yeah, we're encountering this on other files. It's city staff have the perspective that all of these corridors in the rural areas are now considered rail corridors. So for the record, we would ask that condition not be imposed on this application. If it has to be imposed, it has to be imposed, but we feel that a warning clause for land, the property itself is vacant today, and the retained lands will remain vacant in the future, and warning future owners of the public that corridor might be a rail line. Right now, there's no policies that speak to developing it as a rail line in the future. And it's just a recreational trail. So we don't see the necessity of imposing that condition.
Okay. Mr. Teft, please, could I have your comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we're just asking for that condition because the line is still owned by VIA, and it is designated in the OP as a rail line. So we're just asking that for the potential future use of it as a rail line.
Okay. So, Mr. Poulton?
So we obviously have a difference of opinion interpreting the schedules in the official plan. So it's at your discretion whether this condition's applied or not.
Okay,
So,
if it applies, then you're happy to go ahead today with this?
yes.
Yes, and planning, there are no other concerns, I understand.
Correct.
Okay, members of the panel, any questions, concerns? None? Oh, Mr. Vervoort.
A couple of things, with respect to the noise vibration covenant request from the city. This is a lot line adjustment, so we're not creating a new lot. So I'm not sure. I mean, the house is there already, so they would, I'm not sure like what we're actually accomplishing by adding that. And then I had a question for South Nation. They're concerned about a slope stability, a notification on title. Again, this is a lot line adjustment. There's an existing residence on the property that's being enlarged. So maybe Mr. Holland could speak to that as well.
Yes, thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. This is a lot enlargement. I recognize that. Developability of the enlarged lot isn't really changing. The constraints on the enlarged portion are probably greater than what is recognized. There's an unstable slope that's mapped in one of the schedules of the official plan. There's also policy for watercourse setbacks that indicate that the natural hazard may be the greatest setback, and this natural hazard hasn't been determined. So we would like the landowner receiving the severed lot to be aware of the potential constraints and the potential need for future studies. It's also noted that there's a building there that may or may not have a building permit. This may not have been recognized in the past. So we did ask for a simple condition that just requires them to notify the landowner receiving the enlargement.
Thank you. Mr. Teef, do you have any comments on the Conservation Authority's request?
I don't have any comments on that one, but I can answer your previous question about the notice on title for the rail line. So we were looking at this to be applied to the retained land because there's currently not a house on that lot. It's undeveloped, not for the receiving land.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Chandler.
I would just like to know the distance from the edge of the retained land, the edge of the land to be conveyed to approximately, maybe by contours, the top of slope of this concern relating to unstable slopes. Because when I scaled it off just on the drawing, I got about 150 meters.
So the vacant lot, the one that's being retained, the concern with the natural hazard doesn't apply to that one. It's to the severed lot that's being added for the lot enlargement.
So is there, yeah, and so when I measure from the closest part of that boundary to the top of slope based on the drawing, I get about 150 meters. Mr. Polton, are you able to provide any additional information on that?
I don't have any information on setbacks from top of slope. Again, no topographic plan's been prepared in support of this application. I will say that in terms of the lands that are being severed and added to 795 Canary Street, that property is already developed with a detached dwelling. So there's no opportunity for new development that doesn't currently exist. My understanding is that the Conservation Authority is concerned about secondary dwellings like coach houses and the future for a second dwelling, potential for a second dwelling on those lands. That potential exists today before the application is heard. And in terms of that possibility, a future building permit would be required for any other development on the existing parcel. Sorry, at 795 Canary Street. And so through that building permit application, it'd be reviewed against the zoning bylaw and the Ontario Building Code. And so again, we're not proposing any new development today through this application, and nothing changes in terms of those severed lands in terms of development potential. And we would, again, to clear this condition, it looks like the current owner just has to write a letter acknowledging some stuff and provide that to the owner at 795 Canary Street. That doesn't seem overly onerous, but we do not think that condition is necessary.
Any further questions, Ms. Chandler?
I think I would reserve just to discuss that
Reserve?
condition.
Okay, members will reserve. Thank you very much, Mr. Poole.
Thank you.
Number 11, 2230 Dunrobin. Hello, can I have your name, please?
Yes, my name is Christine McQuaig, Q9 Planning and Design. The address is 43C Eccles Street in Ottawa.
Okay. Thank you. And just before you start, this was heard before and it was brought over to the state and it's been amended as per a new D4R plan. And I'll just, if I might read this before you start, the severed property is shown on parts 1, 2, and 3 of a draft 4R plan filed with the application. Will have a frontage of 62.26 meters and an irregular depth of 1,162 meters, and will contain a lot area of 4.58, 4.49 hectares. This parcel contains the existing dwellings and 4 accessory buildings known municipally as 2226 Dunrobin Road. It is proposed to establish an easement right-of-way over Part 3 in favor of the retained lands, 2230 Dunrobin Road, for hydro, utility access and maintenance. Is that correct?
There is also an easement over Part 2 for access in favor of the retained lands, but everything else is correct, with the only revision to the draft R plan primarily being the slight change in lot area for the lands to be severed, and the lands to be severed now 4.49 hectares.
4.49.
Yes, it was a minor adjustment to the severance boundary towards the sort of northwest, just to steer clear of the unevaluated wetlands identified by the Conservation Authority.
Okay. I understand from planning there are no concerns.
Correct. We
With this?
would like to speak to some of the conditions that have been requested
Okay.
in similar context to the previous application.
Okay, maybe we'll just hear about the conditions from the applicant first, and then if I could get back to you, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there are two existing residences on these lands already. The proposed severance is to simply allow each residence that has been there since, I believe, sometime in the 60s to have their own, dwelling on their own lot. Given that there are existing residential dwellings on the site and that there is no proposed development, we don't believe condition 2 relating to groundwater, as there's already wells and septic on the property. We also don't agree with condition 3, which relates to thin soils. As I said, there's already residential development on both the severed and the retained lands. Condition 6 relating to OBC compliance, I did already speak to Mr. Tieft at the city about that, and we've been confirmed that condition 6 is not required. It was an error in the review. And we would also oppose condition 4 and 5. So condition 4 is related to the railway line that was spoken about previously. There's no tracks. It's used as a recreational trail, and the dwellings are already there, but we believe it's quite onerous to require the applicant, the owners, to go through entering into a development agreement with the city to establish warning clauses on title related to something that is no longer there and is no longer in operation. Similarly with it is in proximity to a bedrock resource area, but the dwellings are already there. There's no proposed development, and there's actually no active license or operation across the road as well. I want to minimize the instances where owners are required to enter into development agreements to apply warning clauses on title when they're not really necessary. Legal department at city is very, very overworked right now, and it takes a significantly long period of time to get minor things like this cleared and reviewed. And their stance as of late has been that they have up until the 2-year lapse date. And so there's no urgency to clear these conditions. So it's a bit of a burden on owners, especially, not developers, just regular homeowners trying to clear these conditions. And we don't feel that these conditions and the warning clauses on title are justified for what we're requesting, being just to sever the lands to allow these existing dwellings that are already there.
Could I have a response from planning, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So our cash and boot condition is requested because this is the creation of a new lot. Though there are existing houses on both lots, this is still the creation of a new lot, and the way the cash and boot bylaw works looks at the value of the land from the creation of a new lot. The notices on title, again, they're just standard notices on title. It is close to a railway, similar situation to the last file that was just heard. And condition number 5 regarding the notice on title for the bedrock resource overlay, we received an MRA from the applicant. It didn't necessarily satisfy our request for showing no impact down the line, but we're just asking for a notice on title for any potential future owners of the houses that they are next to a bedrock or sand and gravel extraction area.
And you aren't asking for condition number 6?
Yes, that's correct. Condition number 6 was an error based on interpretation of the lot line, so that one doesn't apply.
Okay, so it's conditions 2, 3, 4, and 5 that you want to remain, well, number 1 is obviously as well.
Yeah.
But 2, 3, 4, and 5, you want those to remain in as well. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yeah.
Any comments, members of the panel, questions? No? Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Chandler, I didn't see you.
Question for planning. Having an agreement on title for bedrock resource area overlay or potential thin soils, what is it that is believed is accomplished by this? Just like, what is the reasoning for this? I understand why the title for quality and quantity of groundwater, that's a heads up to people who may not realize they're in the rural area and that water is difficult to guarantee, and so they don't hold it against the city. But with respect to the other agreement on titles, I'm struggling to understand what the purpose of them is, what it accomplishes.
So to answer your question, I'm not actually sure on the thin soils notice. I know that the bedrock resource area notice on title is more to do with sort of protecting sand and gravel and bedrock extraction operations. So having more lots and more property owners near a quarry can create complications between those land uses. And so acknowledging that those are existing uses there for potential future owners kind of helps reduce conflicts around that.
So I guess that's what I'm sort of challenging is there's already two houses here and through future mineral extraction license applications, just having a notice on title on an adjacent property would make absolutely no difference to that owner's ability to comment on or object to those applications coming forward. So I'm sympathetic with the applicant's concern related to city legal because, as she says, that's 100% true. The time to clear right now in order to move applications through is about the full 2 years. And we are seeing more and more requests for these agreements on title that I'm not sure what we are accomplishing with them. And that's just a comment. And I guess I'm looking for reasoning that we want to continue going to this extent when we're looking at two existing residences already, rather than creating, we'll say, new occupancies. I'll just leave that with the panel for consideration. Maybe I would suggest a reserve on this as well.
I have a question before we reserve. I think we should reserve. Ms. Chandler, based on the agreement on title for Bedrock Resource Agreement Overlay, it's an agreement that says what? And what has to be done to meet the terms of the agreement? I'm sorry, I don't understand. I'm not a planner.
If I can respond, Mr. Chair, the purpose is that you can't simply apply a warning clause on title. Just like a lawyer can't simply just do it out of nowhere, is my understanding. And so the owner has to enter into a development agreement with the city in order to apply warning clauses on title. And so that is why, and especially where warning clauses on title are being requested for things that are either non-existent or we already have a residence that's built and they've been living there. And to some extent, it's also when you buy a new property, it's part of your due diligence to know where you are and you're in the rural area and you expect to have a well and you need to do those investigations. But these two buildings are already here, and to apply warning clauses on title for noise from a railway line that is no longer there. There's no tracks at all. Thin soils, which I'm not even entirely sure what that means or why it's relevant. Groundwater, there's already existing wells that have been used and are continuing to be used for both residences. And then the bedrock resource area, and there's no active license operation. And if there were to be one, the surrounding residents would be notified whenever something was coming into place, and they do have the opportunity to comment at that time if there's issues at that time, but the development agreement is only to apply those warning clauses on title, but to go through that process with the city it places a very large burden and it's very, very time consuming. And I don't, similar to what Ms. Chandler was saying, is that I don't really see what benefit comes from it.
So the Bedrock Resource Area Overlay, they say here an agreement on title. You're saying it's a warning on title.
So you have to enter into a development agreement to apply the warning clause on title.
Yes. Okay. And the same thing with number 3, the agreement on title for potential thin soils.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Verver.
For the applicant, so for number 2, the agreement on title for quality and quantity of groundwater, that's presumably through a development agreement as well.
I assume it just says that the owner enter into an agreement with the city.
So I
To
guess,
provide a covenant or notice that runs with the.
I guess my
lands.
question is like, are we dealing with 4 agreements here or do we just, are they all in one agreement? Maybe that's a better question asked planning. I don't know.
I believe that would be more of a question for planning. I find the number of requests to enter into agreements, either development or otherwise with the city is relatively new and the sheer number of them in a sense. And so I'm not familiar if they deal with them separately or all as one. But as an example, I had one application where it was simply one development agreement to apply a warning clause on title, and it's been months and we still have nothing. And our lawyer prepared, everything up front and said, here, just review what we're going to do. And it's still been months.
Maybe Mr. Teeth can answer my question then. Would all of these things be put in one agreement or would they be separate agreements and cause further inordinate delays?
So all the agreements would be done at the same time altogether, not separately.
So it would just be one agreement that would incorporate these 4 things.
Yes.
So it wouldn't necessarily.
We're done at the time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, members of the panel? No? Okay. Can we reserve? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just one final comment to note that even if it is in one development agreement, my experience is that the time delay will still be significant. And we don't think the warning clauses related to these items are necessary. So I'll just leave you with that. But thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So we'll reserve then, members of the panel. Thank you. That's the end of our business today.